You know the story of Icarus, right? Or at least you think you do. The kid who flew too close to the sun. A classic cautionary tale. But what if we've been telling that story all wrong? What if the fall wasn't the end, but the real beginning?
And for centuries, that's been the moral of the story, hasn't it? It's that little voice of caution that tells us not to dream too big. The world saw the splash, called it a day, and the lesson was simple. Hey, stay safe, stay in the middle, don't you dare reach for the sun.
But this is the question that just flips the entire script. It reframes the whole myth, not as a warning about failure, but as a powerful story about rebirth. What if that spectacular crash was actually the most important part of his journey?
All right, so to really get our heads around this new parable, we have to start by taking apart the old one. We need to look right past that splash, past the scattered feathers, and really see what was going on in that moment we've always called a failure.
And this is such a fascinating way to look at it. The argument here is that the person who fell wasn't some reckless hero. No, it was the obedient part of him, the careful, cautious part that was trapped in that gilded cage of just playing it safe. That's what the sea actually took. So, if the fall wasn't a punishment, then what in the world was it? Well, this is where the story pivots, turning a tragedy into a radical lesson in, well, self-overcoming. The fall is reframed as a catalytic event. You know, it's like a lightning strike. It's this sudden, violent blast of energy that shatters the old landscape. But it's what makes way for new growth. It's not just destruction. It's the trigger for something brand new. So that first flight, the one we've always called a failure, wasn't a mistake at all. It was an experiment. Icarus was out there gathering indispensable data. He was learning something that no warning from his father could ever teach him. He had to feel the heat for himself to truly understand what was possible.
So now he's in the depths of the sea, the heat of the sun still burning in his memory. And this is where a profound change begins to happen. Icarus becomes an alchemist, and his own soul is the raw material he's working with.
And here's that powerful reversal. The sun, which we always saw as the villain of the story, is recast as the catalyst for completion. That fire wasn't a punishment for flying too high. It was the necessary heat to burn away the old Icarus and forge something so much stronger. And you can actually break this transformation down into 4 clear alchemical steps. First, he enters the crucible, that is, the moment of total failure. Second, the heat melts away his old certainties and fears. Third, he refines that raw, painful experience into pure knowledge. And finally, he transmutes his very soul, turning his old weaknesses into new strengths. And here's what came out of that process. Notice that his flaws, his pride, his fear, his innocence, they aren't just erased or thrown away. No, they're transformed. They become the very foundation of this new, unbreakable self. So reborn from this crucible, Icarus is operating on a totally new philosophy. He's done with the old maps. He's forging his own way forward now. He becomes this new kind of archetype, the sovereign striver. This isn't someone who's just happy to survive, to get by. This is someone who understands that real value and a real life is created by relentlessly striving, by constantly pushing past your own limits. And this really lays out the two philosophies side by side, and the contrast is just stark. On one hand, you've got the middle way. Sure, it's safe, but it's a cage built on fear and borrowed ideas. And then, on the other hand, you have his new twin path, which embraces danger as proof that you're actually living. It's a path of creation and constant growth. So what's the ultimate takeaway here? What's the lesson of this second flight for a world that only saw him fall? And this really gets to the heart of it. That spectacular failure, the dying of the lightning bolt, it's actually necessary. It's a shock to the system that wakes everyone else up and shows them that, hey, another way is possible. The ash from that fire becomes the fertile ground for a whole new forest to grow. You know, if you take one thing away from all of this, let it be this analogy. Icarus realized that the crushing pressure of his fall and the intense heat from the sun weren't punishments. They were the very tools required to transform him from something common, like carbon, into something unbreakable and precious, like a diamond. And so, this parable doesn't really end with a conclusion. It ends with a question for you.
We're all told to fear our failures, right? To avoid the fall at all costs. But maybe it's time to look back at them a little differently, to see them not as endings, but as the indispensable data we needed for our own transformation. So what was your crucible? And when does your second flight begin?